All right, welcome everyone to the next episode of And Also This. Okay, and just talk a little bit about how this week's episode came about. Now, I teach about fan fiction in a couple different classes that I offer, and I do have an excellent lecture about why both fiction writers and literary critics should take fan fiction more seriously than is typically the case, but I will spare you that today because I suspect I'd probably be preaching to the choir. However, one time when I was teaching about fan fiction in a class where Alyssa Minch was one of my students, it quickly became apparent that she knew way more about this subject than I did. And as we were chatting after class, she essentially revealed that she had a fan fiction alter ego and had published quite a bit over the years, particularly in the world of the TV show Glee, but I think in other areas as well. And I was also really struck that Alyssa was able to speak with a lot of authority about some subgenres and niches that I had not even heard of. So because I think fan fiction's an important form, particularly since it's where many young writers get started, I've asked Alyssa to join us today, and I'll be taking careful notes in order to improve my lecture on this topic next semester. So we'll chat for a little bit. Feel free to jump in, but like I said, this is a short conversation. We'll have a general discussion towards the end, but we will keep things, trying to keep these kind of short. So Alyssa, I just want to turn things over to you and see if you can just maybe start off by talking about how you got started as a writer of fan fiction.
Yeah, so my first year of undergrad, I was introduced to Glee. It had been on for 5 episodes. It was 2009. And I got really, really into it. And I was like, I need more of this. There's only 5 episodes. So I started reading a little bit of fan fiction, but there wasn't a ton out yet because it was still brand new. So then I ended up jumping onto Tumblr that was also still pretty new at the time. And just seeing what other people were saying and talking about like this show because it was just so different than a lot of what I'd seen. Um, and eventually I started finding these games. So they're RPG games and it's kind of like fan fiction, but you're writing from a character perspective with other people. So it's very community based kind of writing. Um, and I've been doing it since. So it's been about 11 years. Um, on and off, I'll go off for a few months, but for the most part, pretty much always involved in something. Um, so yeah, I've written some like just fan fiction, but then I'm more actively involved in like this kind of side of it of community writing with other people.
Yes, let me ask you, and I just saw Eric had popped on, and he was in my electronic lit class this semester, and we were talking a lot about the borderline between stories and games.
Mhm.
I mean, it sounds like almost part what you're talking about is is a game as much as it is a
Mhm.
form of fiction.
A lot like when someone asks me like how would you describe this because it's kind of weird. It's a lot like D&D with more writing and based in like particular fandoms or like kind of plots. Um, very similar to D&D.
Hmm. So
Mhm.
now, do these happen? I mean, are you essentially writing for each other, or is there really a kind of additional audience for this kind of work?
Sometimes I've been in because I for the last 5 or 6 years have stuck with the same group of people. We all click. They're my best friends. We tend to write just with each other and it's fun and we do all sorts of different stuff, but occasionally there are people who just read it. They'll come on and just read it and then talk to you about it, and that's really interesting because really for the most part you're doing it just to write with your friends because you're like, oh, this would be a really cool plot to like to play with and see what we can do with it, and then other people sometimes do read it.
So the show ended a few years back. Did that really make any difference?
Yeah, 2015.
Oh,
So
wait, you sounded you said that with a sense of like mourning, so I guess it did. Okay, sorry, didn't mean to offend.
well, so this it's the community for Glee was very, very big. Um, quite large. There's a lot of like people who do these kind of games with just original characters and things, and like Harry Potter's huge, but for Glee, it really blew up. 2012, 2013, and then 2015 things slowed down a little bit, but there's still a lot of people writing in it.
Hmm.
Um, a lot of people like to like redo things that happened in the show that they didn't like, or trying different things. Yeah.
So you were just photobombed by your cat. Just wanted to let you know.
Yeah.
We just walked across it. Hey, now you thought, were you able to put together anything that you can just kind of show
Yeah.
about this? Well, okay, well, I think you should be able to just share your screen there.
Yeah. So a really large part of the groups is like, so it's a lot of it's on Tumblr, at least what I mostly am involved with. And when you like create these groups, because I've done a lot of that, you also are doing like kind of a visual element. So you make like a main page that kind of pushes things along, puts plot stuff on for people to branch off of, character graphics and stuff. So I taught myself how to use Photoshop when I first started doing this. So I've got some stuff I can show you. So this was something that I was in August to October. We were working on it. I've got to get my computer to work. Okay. My share screen doesn't want to pop up. Here we go. So this is a group that we had where we were doing kind of like a mystery kind of plot thing. And I made the whole page. So you like drop activities and like this one's a plot that we had going. We had this full overarching kind of plot that everyone was responding to and moving through. So we would drop these things and write them out, character cards and stuff. So I've got more. So then like a character that you would have, sometimes you're writing with other people and sometimes you're writing like individual character kind of solo things. So this is one where I did a solo past kind of thing that was happening. That one, and then where you're interacting with other people. So like this is obviously kind of flipped because of it puts new posts first, but where the person's writing, you're responding from different perspectives, but you're moving the scene along. And we like to use GIFs because it just the visual stuff is fun to look at. But so that's like writing with another person. This is an older one. So sometimes you do like activities where we had one where it's like have your character writing Amazon reviews, and they got to be really funny. I did one about like a cat tower. You do like text message kind of stuff. So you're really like you're doing a lot of dialogue with characters. So texts, things like that, answering questions, conversations between different characters happening. So that's all completely just dialogue. But then like in these ones, it's more of writing, more of a narrative. And then the last one was the fan fiction I wrote last semester or last spring. I also had up, I made these recently. We were talking about doing like a original Harry Potter kind of universe thing. So I made these for it. So it is also very visual just besides the writing. Like I use Photoshop a lot for this kind of stuff.
So now, do you have like a particular character that you tend to write, or whose perspective you tend to take on, or you kind of move around the whole gamut of characters?
At first I moved around a lot, but then I got really attached to Kurt from Glee because I really connected with his character. And like within my group of friends, we all have particular characters who we're just drawn to. I have like a friend who is primarily writing from Santana's perspective. She's incredible. Like it could be from the script. It's crazy. So we tend to kind of stick to who we are drawn to most because we're good at that person. But yeah, sometimes I switch around, but I pretty much just stick to the one.
Okay, let me ask you one more question, then I'll just throw things out to anyone who want to ask something. So obviously, now it's not a straight line between your, doing this fan fiction writing and then now getting your MA with an emphasis in creative writing. But I'm wondering if you see any connections between that start and where you are, and if you've seen any kind of development among your group of friends in terms of their own kind of approach to writing.
Actually, so when I started, I was in undergrad, undecided, went to culinary school, was still writing, graduated, and was like, I really like writing. I want to keep writing. So I ended up going back to undergrad for creative writing, professional and technical writing. So it's actually very tied into having started writing fan fiction. And I think that it's really influenced how I write because character perspectives and things like that, and blocking out scenes and moving things forward. I do feel like it's very connected to having started writing fan fiction.
Okay. I don't know if anyone wanted to jump in with any questions that you might have.
I have a quick question. I know absolutely nothing about this. I'm celebrating being done with my grades. So I thought, let's do something fun. Do any writers from these shows ever show up, or actors or anybody involved, or is it all people who are just doing this for fun?
It tends to be mostly fans, but I have seen like, particularly on Twitter, people will comment about having seen something, or in interviews, you'll hear them talking about having seen things, but I've mostly just seen fans, unless they're under an alias and we don't know, but
It could be lurking, you never know.
I have heard about showrunners and writers actually paying attention to fan fiction to kind of figure out what people are interested in and try to move the show in that direction.
I would say Glee particularly did that.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you can see a shift in the show. If you were involved particularly with like fan fiction, you can see where they shifted into like really catering towards that. So,
but Joyce, picking up on what you were saying, one thing that I noticed, I don't know if anyone saw the HBO series Watchmen that was like swept the Emmys last year, which was great. I thought, but as I was watching, I was thinking, wow, this is so much like fan fiction. Just the approach that you took. If you know anything about it, it took this kind of iconic text from the '80s and advanced it to the current day, but also without violating the source text, made some real substantial changes in it. In a way that is very common in fan fiction, but not the kind of thing that you would typically see in episodic television. So I do think that kind of like just some of the like fan fiction understandings are kind of becoming really mainstream. So I mean, I guess to give you the example from Watchmen, I mean, one of the main superhero characters from that, all this who has is wearing a mask all the time. No one knew this person's secret identity. In the new version, they decide, well, that character just was pretending to be white. That character is actually black, and it introduces this whole trajectory of African American history into Watchmen, which it never had anything to do with it before. I mean, the guy that wrote it initially was British. I mean, so it just took it in a very different direction. Didn't make anything that happened in the original incorrect. It just shifted it all.
So that's a question I've always had about fan fiction, because I think fan fiction is really cool. But I wonder about what's that line between, and maybe it doesn't matter, like changing an entire plot. I guess how much of that belongs to the original author, and then does it even matter that then people sort of just take it over and do what they feel like they need to do?
All right, Liz, it's yours to answer.
I was just thinking. I think it really depends on like what your intentions are with it. Because I know like in a lot of, so like this big Glee community tends to kind of make, so there's the canon, what's canon to the show, what actually happened, and then there's head canon, which is all these things the fandom has decided this would totally fit into the canon. So we've decided that it does. And that can get jumbled if you're really active in like the fan fiction stuff and get confusing. I think if you're going purely on the canon stuff, if it's just for fun, I don't think there's anything wrong with it. But if you like have the intention of publishing, so like 50 Shades of Grey is Twilight. Shadowhunters is based on Harry Potter. They changed enough about it that you can't really tell unless you know the source material really well. But no, I think it really just depends on like what the intention is for that fan fiction, because for a lot of people it's just to get on in, to enjoy it, and to get more deeply into these fandoms. Like a lot of Harry Potter fan fiction is about the Marauders, who really aren't in Harry Potter that much. That's what I wrote about. Or the children in the epilogue, who they continue on with that because they're like, we just want to know more about them, so we're going to make it up. Yeah.
And it becomes a tricky question because I think particularly in Twilight fan fiction, a lot of that was written about by people who actually were angry about the books, or either didn't like the turn they took or something about them. And so that there's, the whole point of it was to do something other than what the author intended, because they didn't like what the author intended. So they made a whole series of changes.
Alyssa, when you were talking about Harry Potter, I was wondering about like The Cursed Child, the Broadway play and all of that. I wonder if J.K. Rowling ever, sort of lurks in some of these groups and gets ideas, because that's all about the kids, right?
It's the kids and then some stuff about the adults, but I think she probably does read more than we realize. Especially because she's always churning out new things where we're like, okay, I didn't pick that up in the books, but I guess it's true since you said it. Yeah.
And I think you can make particularly for her, you can make an argument that if you look at the way that the twins develop in the books, they become kind of more important. And I think that's really because the actors in the movies were more among the better kid actors that they had. And so they really decided to, I think, play those up in the movies. And so, but she was all right with that. And then she like made them bigger characters in the books than I think they were originally going to be. So yeah, she has a very complicated relationship with her fandom and with adaptations.
Yeah.
The other book that's coming to mind is I'm thinking Rainbow Rowell's Fangirl, and then the whole thing is that she writes fan fiction, and then there's like fan fiction at the beginning of each chapter, and then that turned into Carry On, and that whole thing is really fascinating to me. And I was like, if somebody's not writing this fan fiction, somebody needs to write this fan fiction, and Rainbow Rowell's like, well, okay, I'll do it.
Write my own fan fiction.
Nobody else gets to do it, it's mine. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I read Fangirl and I thought that was really cool, especially because I'm pretty active in that community. So
have you read Carry On?
I haven't read Carry On yet, but I'm going to.
Carry On. And speaking of Harry Potter, because Carry On is let's bring in more vampires and LGBTQ.
Yep.
So
Harry Potter.
Yeah.
Hey, I had a question. I don't know if you would be able to answer this one, but I am wondering, kind of in this moment of the pandemic, whether that has had any impact on the kind of fan fiction that people are writing, whether they are writing more perhaps because people are around, or whether whether there's a kind of draw to it, or whether all of a sudden we have fan fiction where all of a sudden everyone's wearing masks in something.
I've seen some people who are like, we're going to pretend it's not happening because we want to escape from it. And then other people who are like, well, why wouldn't we just do it? Because it's happening and we're experiencing it. So why not write about it? But for the most part, I've seen people like, no, this is our escape. We don't want to talk about it. So, and I'm like,
yeah, and I can understand both ways.
Yeah. But I have seen a lot more activity in like that community since people have been quarantined.
But that makes perfect sense. I mean, right? The thing you can do. I mean, when I was teaching this, right, in my fiction class, I was like, well, you know what? We can do this as well as anything else. So that continued through the lockdown of last spring. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Alyssa, do you know if, actually we haven't met. I'm Juan Carlos Castillo. I teach Spanish in the department. Nice to meet you. Are you aware of any cases in which there have been issues of intellectual property rights of any authors that have tried to fight these kinds of writings?
I haven't experienced it personally. I do know that very early on, people just were kind of doing their thing. And then suddenly everyone on their pages was putting, we are not associated with Fox or Glee or the producers, because just in case people wanted to be careful. Or they'll say like, I tend to put, I got these images from Google. They're not mine. I just altered them. Don't want to have any problems. So not claiming any of that, just our own writing.
There was a related case of J.K. Rowling again, where someone had decided to. She had like relied on this site that had like a Harry Potter encyclopedia. She had noted that it helped her in remembering things about the books when she was writing. That happened earlier on. And then the guy who was coordinated that decided to try to publish the encyclopedia, and she sued him. So it seems to me like until you try to make money off something, everyone's kind of decided to let it fly under the radar. But as soon as you want to make money off something, then you have to do what Alyssa was talking about before. You have to file off the serial numbers, and you basically have to figure out a way to remove all of the material that refers directly to the source text. People do that. I mean, that's how it is. It's true. But a lot of like novels will begin as fan fiction and then be transformed into something else.
I'm curious, are there more fan fiction when it's NaNoWriMo month? Like when people are all writing their novels?
I didn't think about that. Yeah, I mean, I tend to see more activity in things in November, December, and in the summer. So that maybe NaNoWriMo may be a part of that. I know a lot of people like keep track of their word counts and things, and I'm like, I got too much going on for that. But
well, all right, we are actually, because we're keeping these short, coming to the end of the time. I don't know if anyone had any other questions, or if Alyssa, if there are questions I should have asked you and hadn't asked you.
I feel like we could talk about it for quite a while, so probably not.
Well, I don't know if you guys know this, but there's actually a very famous case of fan fiction, which was with Don Quixote. I don't know if you know this, but before the second part was published, somebody wrote a second part that was in Cervantes. And then Cervantes refers to it and has actually Don Quixote referred to it and criticized it in the second part, saying, oh, that guy that wrote those false stories about me, those aren't true. So I don't know if you also know of cases in which authors have reacted to fan fiction in a way like that.
Well, I do know there was one where Kurt Vonnegut basically decided to let somebody do this, kind of unofficially gave him permission to take a novelist character from one of Vonnegut's books, Kilgore Trout, and pretend to write a novel from his perspective. But then Vonnegut really didn't like the novel and was dismissive of it from there on in. So I do know that happened.
Well, and there's the whole like Dickens fans were awful. Like they were like sending death threats because he killed off characters that they liked. So maybe fan fiction could have like dealt with that if there'd been Victorian fan fiction. I don't know.
Well, there's a whole world of, I mean, right, in the literary sense, we just call it parallel fiction. And then the whole world of the Janists, that Jane Austen fans, and particularly with Sherlock Holmes fans and The Great Game, which is probably those are probably two of the original fandoms as we kind of think of them now. And yeah, it's the same thing. Arthur Conan Doyle was hounded back into kind of unkilling Sherlock Holmes at one point, like by fans. So, all right, you're right, Alyssa. We could talk about this forever. This kind of thing just leads off. That's the nature of it, right? Once you start pulling on a thread, you can just kind of follow it as far as you want. That's how all these texts work. There's no like end point to it.
Well, once we all come together again, you should do something that everybody can actually show up for. That'll be fun.
I got one quick observation. I was wondering to myself, like, I like Star Trek and Star Wars, more Star Trek these days, but I like them both. And it seems like the extended universe novels, it seems to me like that's like, they've been writing those for decades. It seems like that's an official, it seems like an almost official fan fiction to me. It kind of makes me want to look up some of the authors and see like how they actually like got signed up to do it and stuff.
I've seen a lot of the same for Doctor Who novel.
Yeah, and that too.
And I guess this kind of gets to Juan Carlos's point. The Trekkies were one of the original contemporary fandoms. And what's really important about the Star Trek fandom is that the show's just on the air, the original show, for 2, maybe 3 years. And then there are these fans that are continually like writing about the show, dressing up like the characters, and things we take for granted now, but which were kind of unusual at the time. And it ends up being this kind of resurgence that brings back the show for the series of movies. I mean, it was the fandom that made that happen. And now it's become a kind of platform that continues on in many different ways. But that was, that could have just been 3 seasons and gone. I mean, that wouldn't have been an uncommon experience for a TV show. So. All right, we're at about a half hour. So anyways, Alyssa, thanks so much for making this work. So we got to find out about what you were doing and have this talk. So
Yeah.
hey, so
Thanks.
Sheila will be here next week. Sheila, if you can move your head, we can see what you'll be showing. There it is, the harp.
There.
Really just
I'm going to play that next week.
It'll be the caption will be, Sheila, if you can move your head. Nice to see you guys.
All right, good seeing you too. Take care. Thanks.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye. Alyssa, thanks much.
Yep.
That was fun.
Yeah.